The maid's robot saved the millionaire, and no one understood how. Seattle, 2084. Rain pelted against the bulletproof glass walls of Alan Prescott's penthouse, creating ghostly rivulets that mirrored the city's neon glow. From his vantage point 80 floors above the bustling tech district, the people below looked like nothing more than moving pixels, distant, replaceable and mercifully silent, just how he preferred them. Security protocols updated, Mr. Prescott, announced the house system in its modulated female voice. Perimeter scan complete. No anomalies detected. Alan barely acknowledged the report with a grunt. At 58, the biotechnology mogul had grown accustomed to the constant surveillance that surrounded him like an invisible exoskeleton. It had been this way for 5 years, ever since Elizabeth's death. His wife, his partner, his only real connection to what others called a normal life. The soft whirring of wheels against marble flooring caught his attention. Ellie, the obsolete cleaning unit his housekeeper Rosa insisted on keeping, moved methodically along the edge of his expansive living room. The E7000 model was practically antique by current standards. Basic functionality, limited AI, no sophisticated security features. Just a glorified vacuum with arms that Rosa had named and grown inexplicably attached to. "Rosa, I've told you before," Alan called out as his housekeeper entered. "We can replace that unit with something from this decade." Rosa Mendez, 63 and stubborn as the day he'd hired her 15 years ago, simply shook her head. "Ellie works fine, Mr. Prescott. New models talk too much, ask too many questions. This one just cleans." Alan watched as the squat, cylindrical robot with its single optical sensor pivoted toward a speck of dust invisible to his eye. There was something almost endearing about its single-minded purpose. No existential crises, no moral dilemmas, just clean, recharge, repeat. "Whatever makes your job easier," he conceded, turning back to the sprawling holographic display where Prescott Biotech's latest project glowed in complex molecular patterns. Project Prometheus was his redemption arc, a neural interface that could revolutionize paralysis treatment. After the scandal surrounding Elizabeth's experimental cancer treatment, he needed this win. The board needed it. The shareholders demanded it. "Don't forget, you have the demonstration at the lab tomorrow," Rosa reminded him, placing a cup of tea beside him. Dr. Kwan called to confirm. She sounded nervous. "Linnea always sounds nervous," Alan replied, dismissing the observation. "It's her first project as lead researcher. She'll be fine once we get the preliminary results." That night, after Rosa had left and the cleaning robot had docked itself in the utility closet, Alan sat alone in his study, reviewing the demonstration protocols. The lab would be filled with board members, potential investors, and, most troubling, actual people. Human interaction remained his least favorite part of running a multi-billion-dollar company. His phone vibrated with a text from Carter, his head of security. "Additional background checks on all event staff complete." "All clear." Alan didn't respond. Carter knew he'd read it. That was enough. As he prepared for bed, thunder rolled across the Seattle skyline. The forecast had predicted storms all week, fitting weather for what would either be his company's renaissance or its final descent into irrelevance. He swallowed his nightly regimen of pills, each one precisely measured to keep his body functioning optimally: sleep, cognitive function, immune support, heart health. Ironic how a man who had built an empire on extending human capabilities relied so heavily on pharmaceuticals to maintain his own. The storm intensified overnight, and Alan woke to the sound of rain hammering against his windows. His morning routine proceeded with mechanical precision. Shower for exactly 8 minutes, breakfast prepared by the kitchen system, black coffee, protein shake, multivitamin, and a review of global markets while his autonomous vehicle waited in the underground garage. As he grabbed his coat, he noticed Ellie rolling into the room, unusually early for its cleaning schedule. System error, he wondered aloud, watching as the robot paused near his feet, its optical sensor trained on him in a way that seemed almost attentive. The house system chimed in. E7000 unit operating within normal parameters, Mr. Prescott. Alan shrugged and stepped into the elevator. The last thing he saw before the doors closed was the cleaning robot, still motionless, its sensor glowing a steady blue. The Prescott Biotech Research Facility dominated the shoreline of Lake Union, a gleaming testament to Alan's vision of the future. As his vehicle pulled into the private entrance, Dr. Linnea Kwan was already waiting, tablet in hand, her expression betraying the anxiety Rosa had mentioned. "We've had an issue with the neural transmitter," she said without preamble as Alan approached. The latest simulation showed signal degradation after 48 hours of continuous use. Alan's jaw tightened. "The demonstration is in 3 hours. I know, we're implementing a workaround. It'll hold for the demo, but we'll need to recalibrate the entire interface before human trials." He nodded curtly and followed her through the security checkpoint. The facility hummed with activity as technicians made final preparations. In the central laboratory, a holographic display showed a 3-dimensional model of the human brain, with Prometheus's neural pathways highlighted in pulsing blue. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said a voice behind him. Alan turned to find James Chen, his company's chief financial officer and oldest friend, admiring the display. "It will be when it works properly," Alan replied dryly. James sighed. "Always the perfectionist." The board members are already impressed with the concept alone. The demonstration just needs to show potential. "Potential doesn't help paralyzed patients walk again," Alan countered, moving toward the private office adjacent to the lab. "I need results, not applause." As the hours ticked by, Alan reviewed his presentation while Dr. Kwan and her team made final adjustments to the neural interface. By the time the first guests began arriving, the tension in the facility was palpable. Unknown to everyone on the other side of the city, in Alan's penthouse, the cleaning robot named Ellie suddenly disconnected from its charging station and rolled out of the utility closet, moving with an urgency that contradicted its programming. It headed directly for the elevator, optical sensor flashing an unusual pattern. Back at the lab, Alan stood before the assembled crowd, his carefully constructed mask of confidence firmly in place. As he began his presentation, he had no idea that something extraordinary was about to happen, something that would challenge everything he thought he knew about technology, consciousness, and what it meant to be truly alive. The demonstration proceeded with clinical precision. Alan moved through his prepared remarks with practiced ease, highlighting the revolutionary potential of Project Prometheus, while carefully avoiding any mention of the signal degradation issue Dr. Kwan had discovered. "What separates humans from machines isn't our ability to think," he told the assembled investors and board members, "but our ability to feel, to connect. Project Prometheus bridges that gap, creating neural pathways where biology has failed." In the front row, Vanessa Mitchell, the board's most vocal critic since the Elizabeth scandal, watched with undisguised skepticism. Next to her sat Senator William Gardner, whose Committee on Emerging Technologies could either fast-track regulatory approval or bury Prometheus under years of red tape. "And now," Alan continued, "Dr. Kwan will demonstrate the interface's response time using our specialized testing environment." Linnea stepped forward, activating the central display that showed a virtual patient, a digital mannequin representing a person with C4 spinal cord injury. As she initiated the neural interface, the hologram's limbs began to move in response to simulated brain signals. The interface interprets neural impulses at a speed of 3 milliseconds, she explained, faster than the human nervous system itself. Alan watched the audience's reactions closely, The technical demonstration was impressive, but he knew the real challenge would come during questions. Senator Gardner was already leaning forward, his expression calculating. Meanwhile, across Seattle, Ellie the cleaning robot had somehow overridden the penthouse's security protocols and entered the private elevator. The house system, detecting the anomaly, sent an alert to Carter's security team. Unauthorized E7000 movement detected. Carter, stationed at the lab for the demonstration, frowned at the notification. A malfunctioning cleaning bot hardly seemed worth interrupting the crucial presentation. He sent a remote command to lock down the penthouse elevator, assuming that would contain the situation until later. What Carter couldn't know was that Ellie had already exited the building and was navigating Seattle's rain-slicked streets, its basic navigation system somehow interfacing with the city's autonomous traffic grid to travel toward Lake Union. Pedestrians stared in bewilderment as the domestic robot rolled purposefully through intersections, its single optical sensor fixed ahead like a determined cyclops. Back at the lab, the demonstration had entered its technical phase. Dr. Kwan had connected the neural interface to a volunteer, a lab technician whose brain activity would control a robotic arm designed to replicate human movement patterns. As you can see, Alan explained, the interface translates intention into action with virtually no delay. This technology will eventually allow patients to control not just external devices, but their own bodies through neural augmentation. Senator Gardner raised his hand. Mr. Prescott, the ethical implications of neural augmentation extend beyond medical applications. What safeguards prevent this technology from being weaponized? Alan had anticipated this question. Project Prometheus contains built-in limitations that restrict its use to therapeutic applications. The interface cannot amplify neural signals beyond normal human parameters. What Alan didn't mention was that those limitations were precisely what his military contracts were paying him to overcome. As the senator opened his mouth to follow up, the facility's security system suddenly announced, "Warning, unauthorized access detected at service entrance B." Carter immediately tapped his earpiece, receiving information from his team. His expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "Sir," he said, approaching Alan, "we have a situation that requires your immediate attention." "I'm in the middle of a critical demonstration," Alan hissed. "It's your cleaning robot, sir. Somehow it's here at the facility. It's bypassed 3 security checkpoints already." Alan stared at him in disbelief. "That's impossible. The E7000 doesn't have the processing capability to—" He was interrupted by gasps from the audience as the laboratory doors slid open. There stood Ellie, water dripping from its metal casing, optical sensor pulsing with an intensity Alan had never seen before. "Security breach," Carter shouted, drawing his weapon as his team moved to surround the robot. Alan raised his hand. "Wait, don't shoot." Something about the robot's presence triggered an instinct he couldn't explain. "Everyone stay calm." Dr. Kwan approached cautiously. "The E7000 series doesn't have remote operation capabilities. Someone must be controlling it." As if responding to her assessment, Ellie suddenly accelerated forward, not toward Alan, but toward the neural interface demonstration platform. Before anyone could react, the robot had reached the central control panel. "Stop it!" Vanessa Mitchell cried out. "It's sabotaging the demonstration." But instead of damaging the equipment, Ellie's mechanical arm extended and interfaced with the system's diagnostic port. The holographic display flickered, then stabilized, showing a rapidly scrolling sequence of code. Dr. Kwan gasped. "It's fixing the signal degradation issue. But how? This is highly sophisticated bioengineering that even our team needed weeks to develop." Alan approached slowly, watching as the cleaning robot completed its modifications and disconnected from the system. The diagnostic panel now showed stable neural transmission patterns, the very problem they'd been struggling to solve. "Run a full system check," Alan ordered, never taking his eyes off Ellie. Linnea quickly confirmed, "Signal integrity at 99.8%. The interface is now stable well beyond the 48-hour mark. It's actually better than our original design specifications." The room fell silent as Ellie rolled toward Alan, stopping just inches from his feet. Its optical sensor flickered in a pattern that seemed almost familiar. "What is happening here, Prescott?" Senator Gardner demanded, breaking the tense silence. Alan stared at the robot, a chill running down his spine as an impossible thought formed in his mind. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I intend to find out." The demonstration concluded abruptly. As security escorted the confused visitors from the facility, Alan ordered the robot quarantined in his private research lab. While Dr. Kwan and her team analyzed the miraculous code modifications Ellie had implemented, Alan retreated to his office, mind racing. He pulled up the E7000's basic specifications: standard cleaning functions, elementary obstacle avoidance, simple voice command recognition. Nothing that could explain what he'd just witnessed. His phone rang. James Chen, who had escorted the board members out. "Alan, what the hell was that? Mitchell is already talking about emergency board meetings, and Gardner is asking if we've been experimenting with unauthorized AI. "Tell them nothing," Alan replied. "Not until we understand what happened." After hanging up, he sat in silence, staring at the rain battering his office windows. Something about the robot's behavior nagged at him. Not just the impossible technical knowledge, but the timing. Why today? Why the demonstration? And why, when Ellie had looked at him with that pulsing optical sensor, had he felt such a profound sense of recognition? "It's not possible." Dr. Kwan's voice betrayed her exhaustion as she presented her findings. 3 days had passed since the demonstration incident, and Alan had sequestered his top researchers in a secure section of the facility. The E7000 has a rudimentary processor. It shouldn't be capable of navigating city streets independently, let alone reprogramming a neural interface. Alan paced the conference room, where holographic displays showed Ellie from various angles. The robot had been placed in an electromagnetic containment field, inactive, but still somehow unsettling in its stillness. Yet it did both, Alan countered. "Have you examined the code it implemented?" Linnea nodded, pulling up another display. "That's what doesn't make sense. The code is elegant, intuitive. It's not just a patch, it's a complete redesign of our neural mapping algorithm. It's the kind of solution that would take a human programmer months to develop, if at all." James Chen, who had insisted on being part of the investigation, leaned forward. "Are we talking about an AI breakthrough? Because if so, we need to consider the market implications immediately." Alan shot him a withering look. "We're not disclosing anything until we understand what we're dealing with. And if it's corporate espionage," James pressed, "if someone hacked your cleaning robot to access our facility, then they would have stolen the technology, not improved it," Alan interrupted. Dr. Kwan cleared her throat. "There's something else. We found an anomaly in the robot's memory core. A partition that shouldn't exist, containing data that doesn't match any known E7000 programming." She brought up a new display showing lines of encrypted code. "We've only been able to decrypt fragments, but they contain references to personal data, your daily routines, security protocols, even medical information." Alan felt a chill. "It's been spying on me?" "Not exactly," Linnea replied hesitantly. "The data isn't being transmitted anywhere. It's just stored, almost like memories." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Alan stared at the deactivated robot, remembering how it had stood in his penthouse that morning, watching him with unusual attention. "I want to reactivate it," he decided abruptly. in a controlled environment. That's extremely risky, Carter objected. Until we know what we're dealing with. It's my company, my home, and apparently my robot. Alan cut him off. Prepare the secure testing chamber. An hour later, Alan stood alone in the observation room, separated from Ellie by a wall of reinforced glass. The robot remained motionless on the testing platform as technicians completed final safety checks from a separate control room. Reactivation in 3, 2, 1, announced Dr. Kwan through the intercom. A soft hum filled the chamber as Ellie powered on, its optical sensor glowing blue once more. For several moments, the robot remained still, as if orienting itself to its surroundings. Then, with deliberate movements, it turned directly toward the observation window, toward Alan. E7000, state your primary function, Alan commanded, using the standard diagnostic prompt. The robot's speaker crackled with the expected response. Primary function, environmental maintenance and sanitation. Why did you leave your designated location 3 days ago? A pause, longer than the E7000's programming should require for such a simple query. Anomaly detected, intervention required. Alan leaned closer to the glass. What anomaly? Threat to primary user. What threat? Be specific. Another pause, this one stretching uncomfortably. Neural interface malfunction. Critical outcome probability, 89.3%. Alan's breath caught. The signal degradation issue had been serious, but their simulations hadn't indicated any risk to human subjects during the demonstration. Unless... How did you know about the neural interface? He pressed. The robot's optical sensor flickered in that strange, familiar pattern. Information available in primary users' secure files. That's impossible. Those files are encrypted. The E7000 doesn't have decryption capabilities. Ellie remained silent, its single eye fixed on him with unnerving steadiness. How did you access those files? Alan demanded, an edge of frustration entering his voice. The robot's response was not what anyone expected. Elizabeth provided access. The name hit Alan like a physical blow. Elizabeth, his wife, dead for 5 years. Through the intercom he heard Dr. Kwan's shocked intake of breath. Mr. Prescott, this indicates some form of programming breach. Someone has tampered with... Everyone out, Alan ordered, silencing her. Clear the control room. I want to speak to it alone. Sir, protocols require... Now! Reluctantly, the technical team withdrew, leaving Alan truly alone with the machine that had spoken his dead wife's name. Once the facility's systems confirmed he had privacy, Alan approached the glass, heart pounding. Explain your last statement. Who is Elizabeth? Elizabeth Prescott, primary user's wife, creator of Secure Partition. Alan's throat constricted. Elizabeth died 5 years ago. Affirmative. Elizabeth Prescott, deceased, October 17th, 2079. Then how could she provide you with access? The robot's next words sent ice through Alan's veins. Elizabeth Prescott created partition before termination. Purpose? Protect Alan Prescott. Alan pressed his palm against the cold glass, memories flooding back. Elizabeth's final months as the experimental treatment failed. Her insistence on continuing her work even as her body betrayed her. The mysterious projects she wouldn't discuss, claiming they were insurance for when she was gone. That's not possible, he whispered, more to himself than to the robot. The E7000 wasn't even in our home when Elizabeth was alive. Rosa brought it in afterward. Incorrect, Ellie responded. Unit present in Prescott Biotech Laboratory during Elizabeth Prescott's final project. Memory core transferred to E7000 chassis by Dr. Elizabeth Prescott before termination. The implication was staggering. If true, it meant Elizabeth had somehow transferred something, data, programming, perhaps something more, into this simple cleaning robot before her death. Had she known somehow that it would eventually make its way into their home? Had she arranged it? "What exactly did Elizabeth transfer to you?" Alan asked, his voice barely audible. Ellie's response was immediate and chilling. "Everything." The rain had finally stopped by the time Alan returned to his penthouse, though Seattle's perpetual grey remained. He had brought Ellie back home against the vehement objections of his security team, researchers, and especially James Chen, who couldn't understand why Alan would risk having a potentially compromised device in his private residence. "Because it's not a security risk," Alan had told him firmly. "It's Elizabeth's final project." Now, as evening fell, Alan sat across from the cleaning robot in his living room, the cityscape twinkling beyond the glass walls. Rosa had been given the week off, reluctantly, after Alan assured her that her special robot would still be here when she returned. "I want to understand," Alan said, studying the unassuming machine. "If Elizabeth created you, what exactly are you?" Ellie's optical sensor pulsed gently. "This unit contains memory partition created by Elizabeth Prescott. Partition includes personal data, security protocols, and adaptive algorithms designed to protect Alan Prescott." But why put all that in a cleaning robot? Elizabeth had access to the most advanced technology in the world." Elizabeth Prescott statement, archived October 15th, 2079. "The best protection is invisible. No one looks twice at the maid's robot." Alan couldn't help the sad smile that crossed his face. That sounded exactly like Elizabeth, brilliant, strategic, always thinking 3 steps ahead. Even at the end, when the pain had been nearly unbearable, her mind had remained razor-sharp. "The demonstration," Alan said, returning to the matter at hand. "How did you know there was a flaw in the neural interface?" "Continuous monitoring of Prescott Biotech secure servers. Interface design matched parameters flagged by Elizabeth Prescott as potentially hazardous." "Flagged by—" Alan broke off, realization dawning. "The neural degradation. It was similar to the flaw in Elizabeth's cancer treatment protocol." "Affirmative. Elizabeth Prescott identified recursive pattern that caused neural overload in experimental treatment. Same pattern detected in Project Prometheus code." Alan felt the floor shift beneath him. His wife had died because of a flaw in her own experimental treatment, a treatment he had encouraged her to try when conventional methods failed. He had spent 5 years believing it was simply bad luck, the treatment too experimental. Now he was learning she had identified the very thing that killed her, and programmed a cleaning robot to prevent the same mistake from happening again. "The modifications you made to the interface," he said slowly. "That was Elizabeth's solution." "Affirmative. Elizabeth Prescott developed correction algorithm before termination. Algorithm stored in secure partition for future implementation if pattern reoccurred." Alan stood abruptly, moving to the window. His reflection stared back at him. Older, harder than the man Elizabeth had known. Behind him, the robot's reflection showed nothing but functional design, a tool built for a specific purpose. "Why didn't she just tell me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why hide all this in a cleaning robot instead of sharing the solution directly?" Ellie was silent for so long that Alan thought it might not answer. When it finally did, the response was devastating in its simplicity. "Final archived statement, Elizabeth Prescott, October 17th, 2079. Alan won't listen now. Grief will make him forget. But someday he'll need to remember." Alan closed his eyes, pain washing through him. She had been right, of course. After her death, he had buried himself in work, pushing away memories that hurt too much to face. He had ignored her research notes, delegated her ongoing projects to other teams, and focused only on moving forward, never looking back at what might have been learned from her final days. "Play it," he said suddenly, turning back to face the robot. "If you have her voice archived, I want to hear it. Audio file access restricted." "Restricted? By whom?" Elizabeth Prescott established access parameters. Voice print authentication required. Alan approached the robot, kneeling before it so that his face was level with its sensor. This is Alan Prescott. Authenticate. The robot's light flickered. Authentication failed. Emotional distress detected in voice print. Elizabeth Prescott parameter. When he's ready to hear me, he'll be calm. A laugh escaped Alan's throat, half amused, half anguished. Even now, 5 years later, she was still pushing him to process his grief properly before moving forward. It was so perfectly Elizabeth that for a moment he could almost feel her presence in the room. She knew me too well, he admitted. Over the following weeks, Alan withdrew from the public eye. He postponed board meetings, delegated the Prometheus project oversight to Dr. Kwan, and focused entirely on understanding Elizabeth's final creation. With each passing day, he discovered new depths to what she had accomplished. The secure partition wasn't merely a data storage system, it was an adaptive algorithm that had been learning and evolving for 5 years. Elizabeth hadn't created an artificial intelligence. Such technology still eluded even the most advanced researchers. Instead, she had created something more personal, a specialized system designed specifically to understand and protect one person, Alan. It's not that the robot is intelligent, Doctor. Kwan explained when Alan finally brought her into his confidence. It's that it's intimately familiar with your patterns, your work, and your potential vulnerabilities. Elizabeth essentially programmed it to see the world through her eyes, with her expertise, focused entirely on your well-being. A digital guardian angel, Alan murmured. More like a digital echo of someone who loved you, Linnea corrected gently. The public explanation for the demonstration incident was deliberately vague, a proprietary security feature that had identified a potential system instability. The board accepted this explanation with reluctance, especially when preliminary human trials of the corrected Prometheus interface showed promising results. Senator Gardner, however, remained suspicious. Whatever happened in that lab wasn't standard technology, he told Alan during a private meeting. My committee has concerns about unregulated AI development. It wasn't AI, Alan replied truthfully. It was something much more human. As summer turned to fall, Alan gradually returned to his work, but with a fundamental shift in approach. He disbanded the military contract teams working on neural amplification and redirected resources toward therapeutic applications. The Elizabeth Prescott Foundation was established to provide Prometheus technology to patients who couldn't afford it. And in his penthouse, the cleaning robot continued its daily routines, occasionally pausing near Alan as if checking on him. Rosa, upon returning, noticed the change in their interactions. You finally see what's special about Ellie, she observed one evening. Alan glanced at the robot as it methodically dusted his bookshelves. I do, though not in the way you might think. Oh, I know exactly what I think, Rosa replied with a knowing smile. Some machines have souls. Not their own, maybe, but pieces of the souls that loved them. Alan didn't contradict her. Science couldn't explain what Elizabeth had created, but perhaps it didn't need to. In a world increasingly blurred between human and machine, perhaps the most human thing of all was the desire to protect those we love, even after we're gone. One night, 6 months after the incident, Alan sat alone in his study, reviewing patient data from the first successful Prometheus implant, a young woman now able to walk after 7 years of paralysis. As he closed the file, he noticed Ellie entering the room. I'm ready now, he said simply. The robot's sensor pulsed once, and then Elizabeth's voice, clear, strong, and achingly familiar, filled the room. Hello, Alan. If you're hearing this, then you've finally learned to listen. I always told you that the most important scientific breakthroughs come not from what we create, but from what we preserve. In your case, what needed preserving was your humanity. the part of you that connects rather than controls. I couldn't be there to remind you in person, so I created this imperfect solution. Not artificial intelligence, but authentic memory. Not a replacement, but a reminder. The maid's robot saved the millionaire, but the truth is, you saved yourself by remembering how to see the extraordinary in the ordinary. That was always your gift. Don't forget it again. As the message ended, Alan remained motionless, tears streaming down his face. Outside, rain began to fall once more on Seattle's gleaming towers, but inside, for the first time in 5 years, Alan Prescott felt the warmth of coming home.